Men are told only sissies cry, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. I've had so many men come to me and like, I love my guy friends, but they all just want to help me go out and get laid. I'm broken. I need support. For men, it's harder to be honest about the pain because already you're thinking only sissies cry. Guys that I dated would come back from hanging out with their guy friends and they knew about their favorite sports teams, but I was like, how's their wife and kids? And so even guys in general, it's a different kind of dialogue. But when we hit crisis, we're all just human. If you've been abused, diminished, if someone's tried to erase you, going to them with your bleeding heart and sharing the pain that they're causing is very dangerous. In fact, Bill Eddy says, don't admonish, don't advise, and don't apologize to a high conflict personality. And so we really don't want to show our tender underbelly. You want to do that in a safe space.
Hey y'all, 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞 with the 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐬 Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, derelicts. Welcome to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. I am your host, 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞, and we have another very special, well, I don't know if she would call herself a derelict yet, but maybe we'll convince her to. We were just chatting actually before the episode aired, and Karen, you asked me a really great question. That was, why did you call it the Derelict Podcast? Does it make sense to you now after I gave you that
Now, after you gave
definition?
me the definition, it makes a whole lot of sense. But I was
Good.
scratching my head a little bit, I have to admit.
Yeah, for sure. And here's the thing, you guys. The reason that I invited Karen on here is that she is a divorce coach, just like myself. She's been doing it a lot longer than I have. So I'm really excited to hear some of her wisdom and experience that she's seen over the years. And you also work in pretty high conflict situations as well, correct?
Yeah, that's my wheelhouse.
That's your jam?
Complex, high conflict, difficult, yeah.
You know, so I guess so before we dive in, let's talk about a few different things. Number one, Karen also has a podcast. She talks a lot about getting past divorce. I'm going to have the pleasure to be on the podcast pretty soon as well, so I'm looking forward to that. And then you're an author, right? Yes. And you've been doing this work since what, 2010?
That's correct.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. I can't even imagine. I really want to talk to you later about what you've seen, especially over the last 15 years, because I can only imagine that that's changed a lot as far as divorces goes, at least from what I understand. So, Karen, so excited that you're here. I wonder if maybe here's where we start. Let's start with, so you work with a lot of high conflict divorces. Help us understand. I know a lot of the audience often ask me when they're going through coaching or the men that are going through coaching, they're like, I don't understand the difference. Like, I have an attorney, maybe I even have a mediator, maybe I even have a therapist, I have my friends, I have my family. Like, why do I need a coach? Like, can you help define those terms? Like, why does somebody need an attorney versus a coach versus a therapist versus a mediator?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. So it's really important to have a team. It is the most overwhelming, multidimensional transition any of us ever go through. And so to go it alone is like drowning in the ocean and waving the lifeguard off. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And so then who do you need? And of course, we first think, well, it's a legal process. We need an attorney, and there's different types of attorneys, but we need an attorney. And then you're negotiating basically two things, custody if you have children who aren't emancipated, and finances. And so you need a financial expert, even if you're a financial expert, or even if you don't have a lot of money, or if you have a whole lot of money, you should have a financial expert. And so that takes care of two key things. But there's this third piece, which is, because it's the most overwhelming, multidimensional transition that you go through, the emotions and the mindset are all over the map. And so a divorce coach, which I got divorced in 2006. I don't believe we existed. If we did, there were very few. So I had a therapist, and that's what even in today's day and age in 2025, most attorneys still suggest if you're struggling, get a therapist. And so a therapist can be incredibly helpful to understand the psychology of what's going on, to help you heal the past. But most therapists haven't spent a lot of time in the divorce realm. Most therapists don't specialize in coaching people going or supporting people going through divorce. A coach has a lot of experience with divorce, and a coach has a lot of experience in helping you notice your monkey mind and your negative mindset and the impact that's having. And while a therapist may help you understand why you ended up with your spouse and what's going on, you then have this great session. You go home, the same argument happens over and over again. Everyone's throwing emotional grenades across the room. And you're like, WTF, I don't have anything. I've got no tools. The coach comes in with skills, tools, mindset, emotional regulation, a sounding board, a safe place, a non-judgmental partner, someone who celebrates you, someone who challenges you, someone who, if you're skilled in the area, can really inform you about experts and processes and what have you. And so, in my opinion, the divorce coach is as essential as the attorney.
I can see that. And I love how I just want to repeat some of the things that you said because I thought it was so powerful. So you have custody and parenting time and finances. And those are kind of the three main ones. And I broke that out. I know you just said custody, but I live in a state or lived in a state when I went through my divorce, so those are two different things. So some people don't even realize that, sometimes it's the same thing, sometimes it's different, right? Custody is who's in charge of like big quote unquote decisions. Where do they go to school? Where do they go to church? Things like that. And then parenting time is how much time do I get to spend with them? So like in my situation, as an example, I got divorced in a state that there is no joint custody. It does not exist. So one person gets sole custody 100% of the time. The only way somebody could get joint custody is with a side agreement that's outside of the court. State of Oregon is weird, very weird. State of Washington, where I live now, like most other states where joint custody is kind of just standard. Thankfully, that's moved a lot because maybe even when you started 15 years ago, I would assume you saw a very different world.
It's changed in a number of ways.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Sure.
I
did not know that about Oregon.
Yeah, isn't that weird? It's a very odd.
Quite the outlier.
You have to, like, if so the judge in the court decides who gets custody, and then the only way the other person could have joint custody is if both parties agree.
Yeah.
Now, in a high conflict divorce, it's not going to happen, right? So I think it's interesting that you broke this down because, most people, I agree with you, stop at the attorney. And frankly, I did too when I was going through my divorce. I was like, well, it's mainly about time with my kids. And I don't really care too much about the finances, like just split them. That's fine. I'm not going to argue over this stuff. And I ended up giving her more and everything else. I was like, I don't really care. That's not important to me. What's important to me is time with my kids and be able to be the best dad that I can and to be able to move forward with my life. That was the most important thing. And then I thought, okay, well, I should see a therapist because I have a lot of stuff from my past baggage that's like really hindering me here. And it wasn't until honestly years into therapy to when I realized, oh, I get it now. A therapist isn't really trained to help you move forward. They're trained to help you go from your past, right? Your past trauma, your past childhood issues, your past stuff to present.
Yeah.
And they're not
really well put.
They're not trained to move you forward. So it's not the therapist's fault. Like I went to my therapist for years. He's an amazing man. I would recommend him to anyone. I'm not against therapy, but you also have to realize like what are people's jobs? And you mentioned another one. So I've also, I don't know if I told you this or not, Karen, but I've owned a financial planning company for almost 2 decades now. That's the thing I've done for most of my adult life. So I know finances really well. And here's the one thing I'll tell you, attorneys are awful when it comes to money, and finances and numbers. Do you agree?
100%.
They don't know how to read a tax return. They don't know how to talk about retirement funds. God forbid you're a business owner, you're going to get screwed. Like they just don't, that's not their
wheelhouse.
It's not their wheelhouse, right? Like their job is I create the paperwork, I get you through the court system, I get you divorced, and I charge you as much money as possible, right? Like that's the job. And I'm not saying that that's immoral or anything else. I'm just saying that's the job. So when we put other things on them, I think is where we get in trouble.
100%. I would say your attorney knows your legal rights, and they should be good at negotiating. They should be very skilled at negotiating.
For sure.
And supporting you in your legal rights. A lot of divorce involves finances. And so a lot of attorneys are like, I've got that. And I'm like, please do not. They didn't go to school for it. It's not what they do 9 to 5. You need somebody who swims so comfortably in the pool of numbers, who can forecast for you, who can help you understand the tax ramifications, where there's fees, where the apple and orange look like they're the same, but they're oh so different. Like if you don't have that, even if both parties want to do what's fair, you could end up getting screwed.
For sure. Like I'll give, a little while ago, I had a certified, financial divorce specialist.
CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I do not have that dessigation. I'm a CFP and a bunch of other designations, but I don't have that one. And it was really interesting to hear from him because he's been in the business about as long as I have. And here's an easy example for anyone that's listening that this should be able to be pretty obvious in your mind. A lot of people, especially in the United States, have a 401k or other retirement plan that usually starts with a 4, because that's the IRS code for people that don't know what a 401k is. Most people that have a 401k have deferred taxes. In other words, they put money in, they didn't pay taxes up front, they're going to pay taxes when they take the money out. So here's a very, very simple example. And also, by the way, gender doesn't matter here. So it doesn't matter who's who. But let's say that one person in the marriage, let's say there's $1 million in this 401k, and one person in the marriage is making $500,000 a year, and one person's making $50,000 a year. Okay. If they split that up, 500,000, and then pull the money out, what's the difference? Are they both going to get the same amount of money? In other words, if I'm in a 50% tax bracket and my spouse is in a 10% or 15% tax bracket, am I going to get the same amount of money? Of course not. That simple thing I've noticed the attorneys don't understand.
I agree with you completely. I think that having somebody who really understands finances, and even if there's a little bit of money, we all need to hold on to as much as we can. And therefore,
for sure.
Yeah.
By the way, that applies if that was $100,000 or $10,000. It doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. What matters is, like, if somebody's in a much higher tax bracket, they're going to walk away with less money. Yeah. And they're also going to have a higher tax bracket after. So the other thing to consider is, okay, one primary earner, male or female, doesn't matter. One secondary earner. Well, by the way, once you get divorced, if you were filing jointly together, and now you're separate, and I have this income way up here and she has this income way down there, same thing happens to tax brackets, which now also affects, guess what? Child support, other money that's coming in, and that all needs to get factored. And attorneys so often, from my experience, and I'll get off my soapbox here for a second. I'm just on my 20-year financial planner soapbox here for a second. So there's so often it's just like 50-50. Well, it's not 50-50 though if you're not actually walking away with 50, right?
100%.
So I'll get off my soapbox for a second and I'll come back. Help me understand more about, I'm a guy, I'm going through divorce. Oh, that's actually an interesting question. Maybe I'll ask you that first. Do you work with more females or males, or is it mixed, or what?
The few female divorce coaches in the country that work with men, I would say that I personally have close to 50% on my roster. My team of coaches, it's probably more about 30%. Our audience across all platforms is 35% men. When people come to my podcast to only work with women, I remind them that I have men listening and we're not going to diminish them. So let's be sensitive in terms of the words and the terms that we use. And so I have a real passion for working with men, especially in high conflict divorce, because I think I heard you talking about this on one of your other podcasts. I think that there is this sense that men aren't really in abusive relationships. Men really don't get treated in the way that women do. And so I tend to work with the sloppiest, most complex situations. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's utterly heartbreaking and difficult, but I have a real passion. My dad was in a very abusive marriage. I think that I ended up just having a real passion for helping men.
I appreciate that, and thank you for that, because I remember, I don't honestly even remember which episode that was, but I remember what we were talking about. And that is that anything that's not physical or sexual abuse can be much more subtle and hidden. So since men overwhelmingly percentage-wise tend to do a lot more physical or sexual abuse, at least that's reported, let's say, it gets a lot more airtime. But there's a lot of other abuse besides those two things. And I'm not saying those two things aren't bad. They're awful. They're horrific. All forms of abuse are horrific. But there can be some emotional, spiritual abuse that can be worse, just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah. You've got emotional, you've got verbal, you've got spiritual, you've got financial, you've got sexual, you've got physical, and the ones that don't leave marks and scars are in family court, not still in this day and age, not honored for the pain and devastation that they cause to either gender.
What do you? So I'm surprised also by your statistics on how many men you work with. Because my experience with men, and it seems like it's almost a societal expectation. Like and I'm curious your thoughts on this as a woman as well, but it seems like if a woman needs help or she's in a bad relationship or she wants therapy or something else, it seems like generally as a society, we're like, good for you. That's awesome. You do that. You do what's best for you. You work harder. You get where you need to go, right? You get the healing you need. And then if a man says it, it's like either what did you do wrong, or I don't know, like just work harder. At least that's what I'm told as a man.
I'll take that from a different angle.
Sure, please do.
And I don't completely. I'll hear me out here. Us girls are raised where it's okay to cry. It's okay to talk about our feelings. It's okay to sit with our girlfriends and really process things through. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open. It's safe. Us girls in our communities are raised that this is who you are and it's okay. Men are told only sissies cry, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then when they get older, I've had so many men come to me and like, I love my guy friends, but they all just want to help me go out and get laid. And I'm heartbroken. I'm broken. I need support. And so I think that for men, it's harder to be honest about the pain because already you're thinking only sissies cry. My whole life, the guys that I dated would come back from hanging out with their guy friends and they knew about their favorite sports teams, but I was like, how's their wife and kids? And, so even guys in general, it's a different kind of dialogue that happens. But when we hit crisis, we're all just human. And my heart breaks for men who feel like I've got clients who are like, Karen, once a week when I talk to you is the only time that I process this stuff, that I'm honest with you and with myself. And that's heartbreaking. And we need a movement where there's healthy masculinity, which involves feeling your feelings, being vulnerable, not feeling shame over your circumstances, and having the kind of healthy support so that you can process and so that we can, and this is my favorite thing, break generational chains of abuse, of unhealthy masculine, toxic masculinity, all of those things. And the only way we do that is by supporting our men when they go through crisis to do it authentically, vulnerably, honestly, so that they can grow and be a better version of themselves.
I love that. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that as well. Yeah, I've found, you said a lot of really great things there. The first thing that you said that was really great that I actually wrote down is when we hit crisis, we're all just human. Brilliant. Yeah. So true. Absolutely true. And the other thing as well that I've learned through my own journey in coaching men myself is that I've learned something about vulnerability in men and why men don't like vulnerability. And from my experience, men don't like vulnerable not because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't like vulnerability because of how it makes them feel. Because the very essence of vulnerability means that I lose my power. I'm vulnerable. Like if I'm vulnerable to attack, it means that bear is going to attack me. So a man sees that as, well, I don't have any power. I don't have any control. And one very masculine trait is power. Now that can be used in a very toxic way. As you mentioned earlier, of course, men have been using power in a toxic way since the beginning of time. Men have also been using power in a very healthy, life-giving way since the beginning of time. And that doesn't get enough press, I think. So what I've found in working with men is I think vulnerability is the same as authenticity when it comes to men. Because if a man is authentic and he's authentic with how he feels and with the emotions that he's going through and what's going on, a lot of people would call that vulnerability. But I think that the moment you call it vulnerability, a man's like, no, I can't be vulnerable. I got to be strong. I got to have power. I got to pick myself up by my bootstraps, right? But I think it's interesting because I think it's the same. I don't know. I think it's the same thing. What do you think?
I think I don't know that anyone's ever presented it that way. I would say, and this is without giving it a whole lot of thought, I would say that it's impossible to be authentic without being vulnerable.
True.
I don't know if you can be vulnerable without being completely authentic, maybe, but it's impossible to be authentic, male or female, without being vulnerable, because being vulnerable means I'm coming naked in front of you. This is who I am. These are my feelings. These are my thoughts. These are my fears. These are my uncertainties, and that requires us to drop the guard. And I'll tell my people, do not drop your guard in front of just anybody. You be very careful. You be very safe. So if you're listening and you're thinking, there's no way I'll be vulnerable, then, and certainly anyone who's been in a high conflict marriage, you've come from pain, you've lived in your marriage in pain. You have to be really discerning about who you open up to, who you trust. You have to be very discerning. Otherwise, you're going to experience more pain. I was talking to a New York City matrimonial attorney about a client. I have a very successful client who runs his own law firm. And I was explaining how he was such an abused spouse, and she had this face on. And her reaction to me was like, come on, Karen, really? And I just said, that's the problem. You just shamed somebody who has been as beaten down as every woman that you would champion. That's the problem. It doesn't matter their physical size. It has jack shit to do with their physical size and everything to do with their history. If we come from a dysfunctional family, if your dad abused you or your mom had some personality disorder and you became a people-pleasing, codependent, conflict-avoidant individual, you are going to meet and marry some version of that and rinse and repeat an experience, and you're going to be scared to be vulnerable. And yet being vulnerable for all of your men is the most courageous thing that you can do. And men are courageous.
100%. I remember a few years ago when some very I'm not going to mention any names, but very high profile men, right? Actors and entertainers and that sort of thing started coming out and saying that, talking about their abuse stories. And I remember the first initial reaction they got from just about everybody. And that was invalidation.
100%.
It was, no, you're wrong. No, you weren't abused. Don't be a sissy. Don't be a simp. Don't be a whatever, fill in the blank. Much worse words than that. Right? Just no, your experience is not valid. It's interesting. I was having this conversation with a psychologist the other day, and we were talking about the word trauma. And the word trauma is so difficult because there's no definition. We all define our own trauma. There's a definition of trauma. I just mean there's no standard like this was trauma, this wasn't trauma, right? So to some people, wow, I just spilled my M&Ms, that's trauma. Like, who am I to argue that wasn't traumatic for them? Because I don't know what happened with the M&Ms before. Maybe they spilled M&Ms in front of their gross uncle who then groped them up right after they spilled M&Ms. Like, I don't know that story, right? So I can't speak to their trauma. Yet it's very difficult for me as a very kind of critical, cynical person sometimes, where I see somebody just like whining about something that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, for me to really count it as trauma. But one thing that I've learned in my life is like, yeah, but I can't judge their trauma. I don't know what happened in their life, like that stupid M&M example. I don't know what happened in their life to make this a really big deal for them. And I think if we could all be a little bit more empathetic with that, it would be really helpful, really helpful.
100%.
One thing that you said earlier too, I wanted to come back to because I thought it was interesting. And that is, you made a comment about if you're going to be vulnerable or authentic. Well, let's just use vulnerable for a second. If you're going to be vulnerable, be careful who you're vulnerable with. And I would agree with you 100% because there's a difference between being vulnerable and authentic and privacy. There's a difference between vulnerability and privacy, right? So as an example, I can be vulnerable or authentic with my children if I'm having a hard time, even if I'm having a hard time with their mom, but I can do that in a way to where I'm still keeping it private. So I'm not throwing their mom under the bus, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not appropriate for me to be vulnerable and authentic in a way where I just tell them everything their mom's doing if their mom's doing things that like they shouldn't be in the middle of that. They're my children.
100%. Yeah.
Right. But if something happens and something occurs and there's a negative interaction and they watch it, it's also really unhealthy for me not to just say anything about it and to just let it happen a lot of the times.
Yeah. And I think an example that I would use that was probably more where I was coming from is being vulnerable with your soon-to-be ex is probably not a great idea. Mm-hmm. If you've been abused, if you've been belittled, if you've been a doormat, if you've been diminished, if you've been discounted, if someone's tried to erase you, going to them with your bleeding heart and sharing the pain that they're causing is very dangerous. In fact, Bill Eddy says, don't admonish, don't advise, and don't apologize to a high conflict personality. And so we really don't want to show the person who is high conflict our tender underbelly. You want to do that in a safe space. And people meet me for the first time. I offer a free call, and the first thing that I'm trying to do, my first goal is to build a bridge of trust. Like, what can I do to help the stranger know that I am so incredibly trustworthy that in this 1 hour they can open up and have huge transformation. But I can't force them. And so wherever they are, I meet them there. And when you've been in an abusive relationship, you don't even see that nuance at first, which is why I'm always encouraging discernment. That's not judgment. Judgment is very different than discernment. Judgment is you're an ass. Discernment is that person isn't trustworthy because I haven't been able to trust them in the past. And so when you come at these things with discernment and start making good decisions, you're guarding yourself when it's necessary. And then you're actually letting your guard down and giving yourself a chance to heal and to grow and move forward with the right people.
And I think this comes back to what we were talking about before about vulnerability versus authenticity. And I think this is why, at least for me personally, and for a lot of guys that I've talked to, I think authenticity strikes harder because, again, in that exact example, like, do I really want to make myself vulnerable to this person that then could attack me? To your point, right? Yeah. So you gotta be careful who you're being vulnerable with, as you mentioned. And is that person safe, right? If I go to my ex in a high conflict situation and I tell them all these like deep fears and emotions and everything else, that's a bad example. That's being vulnerable in front of a bear while I'm sitting down and not having any weapons. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. That bear's gonna rip me apart, right? That's different than I'm having coffee with my best bud and I'm telling him the difficulties that are going on in my life and just for him to be there for me. Those are two very, very different things, both vulnerable. How do you, so when you are working with, let's talk about men specifically in that arena, especially let's say the stereotypical male that was told all the things that you said we were told earlier on. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps, just keep working harder. Honestly, your emotions don't really matter that much because you just have to go out and earn and protect and do all these things. Yeah. And, my opinion, some men probably need to be told that more because they can go too far to the other side of the spectrum as well. But how do you work with those men to start learning how to be more authentic in those situations and who to be authentic with? What does that look like in coaching for somebody that, let's say that they're in a marriage where they've never really felt like they were able to do that. Now that marriage is ending. Now they're like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, I haven't really experienced that before in my life.
Right. And they probably haven't experienced it in their family of origin. And they were probably modeled how to be with their guy friends and with women. And so, we lead by example. And the first thing I'm doing is really building that foundation of trust where we're going deeper and they're experiencing the beauty of being heard and seen and held and listened to and acknowledged and validated. And as we build trust, a question that might come up is like my client who said, once a week, only you. Well, after a couple of sessions, who might we be able to add to that list? Nobody. Tell me about your guy friends. Who's the one that's safest? Why is he safe? What are the conversations you have with him? What do you think would happen if you called him and said, dude, I am in a boatload of hurt right now, and I could really use a friend. Like, do you think he would diminish you? Would he shame you? And so I help my men slowly begin to build bridges. And I've had guys who've said to me, Karen, if you have any men who've been through this, who I could reach out to. And I've done that a whole bunch too, where I have like guys who I'm like, hey, I got a new guy. Would you be willing to connect with them? And so that's like a ministry almost for some of my former clients who are like, yeah, send me anyone you want. But I think part of it is modeling and then helping them think through. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It's not like you got to go, but to begin to have that experience. And then to go, wow, I just got off the phone with Josh. We had a different kind of conversation and he held space for me. And I have very feminine energy. When you speak to your guy friends, you're going to, that man-to-man support is going to be different. It's going to feel different and it's going to be beautiful. And then you can start stretching and growing in that direction. And I think that just helps the whole world. Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. I love that. I absolutely love that. Do you do any sort of groups with your men, women that you?
I've just launched a group and only one guy showed up. One guy signed up and, it was not a good idea. And so actually this morning in the shower, I was like, can I do a shout out and pull together a small men's group? It's going to be harder because that, for the same reason, it's like women are like, oh, I'm in. It's a community. It's my girls, my posse. I'm in. Whereas guys are like, I might be able to talk to you, Karen, but I am not getting in a group. And so it's Josh, it's almost like we really need to change the culture. And I've got a couple of colleagues who I love dearly, who are women, coaching women, complaining about the patriarchy and what the patriarchy does to women. And my feeling is the patriarchy sucks for men too.
Appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So we just need a new culture. We need a culture of human empowerment, of human vulnerability. And yeah, you guys, you're farther behind and it's not your fault. And so I don't.
Yeah, I you may or may not agree with this next statement, but I talk about this a lot. I don't actually believe in the term toxic masculinity, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But it's the same thing with the word patriarchy. When people talk about patriarchy, I think what the root of the problem is toxicity. And it's toxicity on both sides. It's toxicity on the male side. It's also toxicity on the female side. I don't think it does any good to say, well, it's whatever percentage male and whatever percentage female. I just don't think that's helpful to the conversation, because then what that does is it then pits this side against another. And then it just perpetuates the problem. Same with toxic masculinity. There are people, we all have toxic traits and we all decide to be toxic from one time to another, whether we're masculine.
Suggesting there's toxic femininity?
God forbid. We never hear about toxic femininity somehow. But no, I would actually suggest neither exist. Now, people will say, or if you look in medical journals, both of them exist. I think neither of them exist. What I think exists, my own personal opinion, is that the true heart of masculinity has core pieces to it. Things like bravery and courage and strength and other items that are masculine traits. Now, again, as you know, every single one of us, whether we're male or female, have both. We both have masculine traits and we both have feminine traits. You have both. And I'm sure there's times where you already mentioned that you're high in the femininity scale, but I'm sure there's times where your masculinity needs to come out, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a business owner. A lot of times, just as a business owner, your masculinity has to come out. Doesn't often work well in feminine when you're reaching your femininity, which a lot of women complain to me about a lot. And I don't get it, but I get it. Right. So I believe that true masculinity is always those good things in a good way. Just like I believe the same thing for femininity, the caring, the kindness, the nurturing, all other feminine traits. So I think what happens is that people label things either the patriarchy or toxic masculinity. And then the problem is your mind, it's impossible for your mind not to think men are evil when you word it that way. Because then I think, or at least a majority of men are evil, or the majority of men that are toxic masculine, or the majority of men that are patriarch. It's not that though. It's not a man who's out there being a terrible patriarchal person that's toxic is not living out his true masculinity. And when we label those two words together, I think that's where we get into a lot of problems. It's the same as if I were to just go out and say, all women gossip, all women are manipulative, all women, don't try very hard, or whatever it is. Well, then my mindset is all women are this way. Are they? No.
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm not getting the connection here. I think that anytime we make a broad stroke about human beings, we're in the wrong neighborhood.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying that I think continually using these terms just makes our mindset even more negative against the thing it was already negative for. Yeah. So even using terms like patriarchy and toxic masculinity, I think is very negative to the conversation.
It doesn't bring value.
Doesn't bring value. Agreed. So what else would you say? And before we end, even though we're going to end in a little bit, I do want to give you an opportunity to say anything that you want to say to the audience. Is there a way for people to get connected with you? Is there anything that you're looking for right now? Just as far as, like you said, you might be starting this group, etc.
My company is Journey Beyond Divorce. You can find our website, our podcast. We're on the social media platforms. I guess I would like to talk just a little bit about, if we could, for a few minutes, about the difference between your garden variety divorce, which has conflict, and high conflict divorce, which is really a very different world.
Absolutely. We have plenty of time. I'm not ending the show right now. I just wanted to make sure that people had a way of getting hold of you as they've been watching. So what's the best way for them to go to your website, Journey Beyond Divorce?
Yeah, Journey Beyond Divorce. And we have a free rapid relief call for anybody who's looking to get some guidance, maybe get some additional support to understand how our coaching works. So people can find that on the website. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I will add that to the show notes. So if you're listening or watching, just go reach out right now, because Karen has a lot of really great things to say. So yes, I would love to hear your thoughts. What's kind of the differences between, would you say, like a high conflict divorce versus more of a...
I say garden variety, whatever
garden variety.
I mean, the bottom line...
Well, what is garden variety? Is garden variety high conflict or garden variety low conflict?
Yeah, I would say that, all divorce has conflict. And so people often say to me, well, what makes something high conflict or complex compared to divorce, which is complex and has conflict? And, so any relationship that is dissolving, there may be one person who wants it and one person that doesn't. There are going to be disagreements. If you're splitting up money and time with the children and decision making, there's going to be some conflict. The difference between that, which is hard, it's all hard, and high conflict is the people who are in a high conflict divorce have been in a high conflict marriage. And so they've been dealing with years or decades of a variety, and I'm not saying all, but I'm just going to list a bunch of them. You're married to somebody who doesn't show a lot of empathy and diminishes you. Stop being so fussy or sensitive. You're dealing with somebody who rarely takes responsibility, who, like, one of my key questions to someone who comes in and tells me they're divorcing a narcissist, because everybody on either side of the gender line is divorcing a narcissist these days.
That's so true. That word is thrown around so much. It's insane.
But what they are divorcing is somebody who might not have empathy, somebody who might not take responsibility for their part, which could simply be their upbringing or their family culture or their neighborhood culture. Somebody who, as like my big question is, tell me a time you reconciled anything with your spouse. And most people have picked up the living room rug, swept it under, waited a day or two, had great sex, and then just rinsed and repeat. And so when you're married to somebody where you never problem solve, you find a way around, but you've actually never solved anything. Typically in high conflict divorce, both parties come from some type of trauma. So what's involved on often both sides is trauma, big T or little t trauma, neurodivergence, personality disorders, an inability to communicate or an inability to communicate in disagreement, which means a real avoidance of. So typically one party utterly avoids conflict and the other one actually gets jazzed by it. Like this feeds them. And so, are these disorders, the bottom line is there's too many spectrums. We're not psychologists. Let's just leave that to the experts who I don't think are very good at it anyway. And let's just talk about what the experience is. And so if you're emerging from a marriage and it's like, I can't communicate with her and she labels me, she judges me, she tells me I'm a bad parent because I've been the primary earner, but I've been the primary earner and we have a nice lifestyle and I couldn't possibly do that and travel and make that kind of money. And so I feel I'm insecure. I believe that I'm a bad parent. I believe that I can't do anything on my own. I believe that I haven't been good enough. And I go and I try and talk, but it's always one-sided. And so then you get into the negotiations of something as important as your children and finances. And honestly, it's quite the shit show. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And if I tell you the kinds of things, judges will say, the two of you just have to grow up and act like parents. But it's like, but one parent is using the children as pawns and actually will leave them bloody on the playing field to win, along with all of the family money. And you say, well, the other parent will just don't choose to fight that fight. Okay, so now my kids aren't going to get therapy. My kids aren't going to, pass class. Like all of these big things. My kids are going to be taken to another country and I'm not going to see them. Like there's so many things that happen. My children are going to be alienated from me because their mom is going to say what a piece of garbage I am until the child is wise enough to know it's not safe to cross mom. And so they're going to start repeating mom's words. And now I'm so devastated. These human beings I brought into the world are treating me the way she treated me, and I'm out of my mind now, and I don't know what to do. And by the way, I don't know how to be vulnerable. I have no group of guy friends to talk to, and I'm not a big fan of support because I've never gotten it. And I have shame, and I'm alone, and I'm overburdened, and I'm afraid to tell anyone that I am so broken. And men going through divorce have a higher suicide rate than anyone else because they do this alone, and they do it alone because they've been set up, and it's not fair. That's high conflict.
Wow, that was so well said. I don't even know how to respond. I just you basically just described my entire experience as well. So yeah, I get that. I guess my question is, how many of the men that are in that situation in their marriage know that they're in that situation? In other words, do all of the men know this is a high conflict marriage and it just is a matter of time, or are they blind to it? Like what's your experience?
My experience is they're blind to it. My experience is they've drank the Kool-Aid. They've believed what's been said to them 100 times, 1,000 times. It's been said to them while they were growing up too, right? Like I would say 95% of my clients can connect the dots between their family of origin experience of emotional love and their marriage experience of
right.
Emotional love. And so, abandonment is something that many of them grew up with in one way or another. And so what do we do? And I want the listener to hear this. When you've been abandoned for so many years, you become codependent. You do more and more and more to try and get love. And with every time you do more for them, you abandon yourself. And the more you abandon yourself, the more you attract other people into your life that are going to abandon you. And the scariest thing is committing to yourself, because when you commit to yourself, when you really focus on self-love and I deserve, the first thing you're going to feel is selfish. And everybody that you've been caring for is going to tell you you're selfish for taking care of yourself. And so that's salt in the wound. And you have to be able to have support, like a good coach, to work through that, to understand that that's the journey. It's just the journey. And when you get over the hump, life can be so incredibly delightful and beautiful. And when I emerged from my 3.5-year high conflict divorce, I was so pleased with the human being I had become that I remember calling my girlfriend, who was by my side the whole time, and I said, if I was told I had to do the whole thing over again to be the woman I am today, I would do it on a dime. So many of my clients have been so resistant going in, so afraid going in, and then they look in the mirror at the other side of it and they're like, I love myself. I'm proud of myself. I am my best self. I am so stoked to be the best dad, the best parent, to go out and meet healthy love, to be healthy in all my relationships. And so one of my favorite sayings is, every upset is a setup, Josh. Every upset is a setup for personal growth. Every time somebody pokes at your tender underbelly and triggers you, rather than shooting the messenger, let them go, look in the mirror, figure out what the wound or the trigger or the tender underbelly or the insecurity is, and work on that. And that will make you a better father, a better person, a better partner.
So true. I couldn't agree with you more. And there's several things that I want to comment on, because that was so beautiful what you shared. And the number one it's part of the reason I started coaching men going through divorce, is because I didn't have that person that was helping me look at what 2.0 looked like, and the fact that it could actually be a beautiful thing. Like, I thought my life was over, Karen. I was like, you know what? Like, I didn't think it was over, like I was going to commit suicide, but I could understand why a lot of men do. Because to be honest with you, to be completely vulnerable and honest with you right now, if I didn't have children, I don't know what I would have chosen. And that could have been on the options. It wasn't on the option list because I had children. If I didn't have children, who knows what would have happened? But it might have been on the list. That's how bad of a place I was in. And I had a great attorney, a great mediator, a great therapist, great friends, and great family, a great life, and I was still there. So you don't have to be this guy that's just a total loser to be in that space. Like, I wasn't. I was a dude who wore 3-piece suits to my financial planning company that I owned, and was in Rotary and very well liked and loved in my church, and everybody in town knew me, and I was going to be the next mayor and all these sort of, like, I was the guy, like the great house in the best school district with the perfect marriage and the 3 kids and blah, 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 blah. So like, I wasn't the guy that you would think. And I think that is what's so subtle about this. You mentioned this earlier, the highest divorce rate first is 35 to 50-year-old men. And then, as you say, you add divorce into that and it makes it an even higher statistic. And I've often wondered why. Like, that's the prime of our life. That is the time where you've gotten a good career, you've had family, like you've accomplished all these things. And so many men feel so empty. You add divorce to that when the whole world is getting put upside down. Whew.
And I think that in general, divorce is very isolating. I mean, even for women, it's like your girlfriends, your siblings, they could all be like, we love you. They have no bloody idea what we're going through.
Right.
And with men, nobody has any idea what you're going through because you don't talk about it.
For sure.
And then you have to keep the facade up.
Right. And then we go watch football together. How you doing? Oh, I'm doing all right. Okay, cool.
How about those Jets? How about those Knicks? Like whatever it is. Exactly. And so the isolation, I mean, I have some other experience with suicide, and isolation is poison, and that isolation for men going through divorce who feel like they're about to lose their kids. They've lost their role as the leader of the family. They've been told they're a narcissist or a piece of shit or whatever they've been told, and they can't go and talk.
Toxic, chauvinistic, abusive, all those things.
And then their attorney, they're doing their job. They're doing the logistics and the negotiation, but who's taking care of your heart and soul? Who's taking care of your person? We're human, you know? Yeah.
For sure. You know, to give hope to the audience, just like you gave the hope earlier, like after I went through my divorce, this is the best time of my life. And again, I thought my life was over. Like this is not, it's, you know, I didn't even choose the divorce or anything else. Like this was not something I wanted to happen. But one thing that you said is really key, which will either hold somebody back or propel them forward. And that is, well, which path are you on? Are you on the path of the victim path, the destruction path, it's everybody else's fault? It's, you know, the toxic people's fault? Is it like all these things, right? Where you don't get any healing, you don't move forward, or God forbid you get into drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever way that you, or just not taking the time for yourself, and you just go from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship, right? Whatever that looks like for you, it's all different flavors. Or can you actually pause for a second, take some space, in your words, be selfish in a good way,
and courageous enough.
And courageous.
Look at what you brought to the table, what your shortcomings are, what your wounds are that need healing. Be courageous enough to slow down, to feel the really difficult feelings and know, was it Winston Churchill who said, when you're going through hell, keep going?
Yeah.
Like, to get out the other side. That's divorce. Go through it vulnerably, go through it honestly, and grow through it so that you can have that life on the other side. And if I could just put a dot on this, typically somewhere around 50% of marriages end up in divorce. First marriages end up in divorce in the United States. One would think we get it right, but the second marriage divorce rate is 67%. And then you go, okay, 3 times the charm. No, 73% for third marriages. We have too many people, men and women out there, believing that they're divorcing the problem. And they go and they meet the same person in a different body. They rinse and repeat. And then they ask that question, why does this keep happening to me? Problem is that question doesn't involve your participation. It is not happening to you. Take control, do the work, and let's all bring down that statistic together.
100%. I mean, that question alone is a victim question. And there's 2 elements of being a victim. There is, did something happen to you, which is just a fact, right? Something bad happened to me, therefore I am a victim, right? And then there's, are you a victim up here?
It's a mentality.
What are you doing with what happened to you, right?
Exactly. And the victim mentality, I work with 7 levels of energy, and the bottom level is victim. And I say to people, you have victim, conflict, and then personal responsibility. Victim is the dungeon, not even the basement. Conflict is the basement. Personal responsibility is the first floor. When you have a victim mentality, you're putting yourself at the bottom of the ditch. There's no value in that. Yes, all of us have been victimized in different ways, but it's the difference between a fixed and a growth mentality, right? It's like, okay, those things happened to me, and yet I'm an overcomer. And I can learn from this, and I can grow from this. And life is hard, and we're all going to face many crises. And so if every crisis is for us, it's Byron Katie says, nothing happens to us. It all happens for us. We may not like it. It's just easier if we do. And when we can participate in it, we can emerge, as it sounds you have and I have, which is a better version of ourselves and ready to help others do the same.
Absolutely. And just as you said too, that victim mindset doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody around us. It definitely doesn't help us. And going back to that whole vulnerability power thing with men, that's definitely not a place of power. Definitely not. It's definitely not. And so what can you control? Well, you can control your mind. You can control how you think about things. You can't control what happened to you. And it's not invalidating that experience, but it's like walking into a victim support group sometimes drives me insane. And it's not because of the fact that people don't need help. They do. I get it. I've been a victim as well. Like, we need help.
Right.
But where it drives me insane is that everybody's just living in their victimhood. It's not, this happened to me, therefore let me own my stuff and move forward. A lot of the time, I'm not saying always, but a lot of the time it's not that. It's, oh, well, this happened, then this happened, and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, you know.
And I identify as a victim. That's the problem.
Right.
Don't identify as a victim. You had your experience, Your experience doesn't define you unless you decide it does. And if you
100%.
decide it does, God bless.
Good luck. Good luck trying to find the things in your life that you really want to find.
Yeah.
And just living that joyful, authentic life. Good luck if you're always the victim.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And this goes back to our conversation earlier of like, all men are fill in the blank, all women are fill in the blank, right? The more I have one of the guys that I'm coaching right now is, does this a lot. I'll just put it that way. And I have to constantly kind of try to bring him back of like, the more you say this, whether you believe it or not, even if it's a joke that all women are blank, the more that's how you live. And not only the more that's how you live, but that's also who you are attracting to yourself. So if I walk around and say all women are manipulative, guess what? I'm only going to attract manipulative women.
And it will confirm, and it will completely confirm your belief, 100%. And that's that fixed mindset. I think that the opportunity to use a crisis like this to even pivot, if you've had a fixed mindset, to that growth mindset, which is, how is this for me? How can I grow past this? How can I use my pain to fuel my purpose, my passion, my future? And the other piece of it is, most of us are parents. Do you really want to be sitting on your pity pot around your kids so that they become codependents because now they have to take care of daddy because daddy's in such a bad place? Like there's just nothing good that comes out of that. And I don't want to sound insensitive. There is a tremendous amount of healing that has to happen. There is such a need for someone to sit with each one of us and to have compassion. We all need to be acknowledged and validated. And when we're coming from these super difficult relationships, we are so thirsty to be seen and heard. Just see me, just hear me, just acknowledge me. Vitally important. And you can do all of that without aligning with or identifying as a victim.
Sure. 100%. I can still be open and honest and vulnerable and authentic with you without letting that victim mentality be the way that I live my life. For sure. It's like I'm doing those things with you so I can move forward in my life and be the victor in my life, not so that I can stay in this victimhood. But to your point, I need to work through it like I can't just ignore it or put it on a shelf or put it under the rug, or I'm a guy, so I'm not allowed to feel it. And I just need to run it out, and I need to get a better six pack, and I need to grow my business more because I can't stop to think about all these things. And then I'm get so stressed out that I eventually kill myself, right? Like that's not a good approach. We got to be honest and authentic and real with it. But at the same time, okay, what can I own? What can I not own? What's in my control? What's not in my control, right? Like the serenity prayer is one of the most helpful things to me ever. Whether I learned it through 12-step. Not everybody did. It's obviously predates 12-step by centuries, but it's great. It's just God, allow me to figure out, basically what it's saying is allow me to figure out what's inside of my control and what's not. And then if it's in my control, give me the courage to do something about it. And if it's not in my control, give me courage to let it go and just let it be. That applies to every area of my life.
I think one of the things I often say is you're 1,000% responsible for your effort. The outcome is out of your control. So
yes.
You do everything that you can do for your children and your divorce, taking care of yourself. And then if things go sideways, that's your path. I don't know if you read at all Ryan Holiday, but The Obstacle is the Way. It's such a
good book.
For like anyone going through divorce, I'm like, get The Obstacle is the Way. Even if you're a Christian, I know it's stoic, but we all need a little stoic in us. So Get The Obstacle is the Way, because divorce teaches perseverance and tenacity and that growth mindset and positivity and what's in this for me and what's my responsibility in this and how can I make the best out of this and all of those things. And that book is just, it's short, it's punchy, it's powerful, and it's a great book to have on your bedside when you're going through divorce.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's right up there on my shelf of like all my divorce books, for sure. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. So if you're listening, watching, go check out the show notes, as well as your book as well, which you haven't talked about at all. Do you want to talk about your book at all? Or is there anything that you want to say before we finish up here?
Well, our book is Stepping Out of Chaos, Turning Pain to Possibility. And it really talks about the 3 key steps as you're going through any transition, but ours focuses on divorce. And that is the first thing you have to do is be aware. Be aware of your part, be aware of the situation, be aware of your tendencies. And then most people resist. And so the second thing is you have to step into acceptance. You can only start from where you are. So you may wish you're not here. It doesn't matter. This is where you are. And so when you can accept where you are, when you can accept how you've behaved, when you can accept that your spouse is and behaves the way they do, you have choice. And so step one is be aware. Step two is acceptance. And then step three is action. And I coach so many people right up to the threshold of action. And I'm like, there is nothing left for us to talk about. You're aware, you accept. Now you have to step through your comfort zone because possibility lies on the other side of your comfort zone. And a lot of people just stop there. And it's like, I can't do it. The fear is too big. The whatever is too much. So the book is all about these 3 steps. It's very simple. It's very divorce focused. It's very encouraging: awareness, acceptance, and action.
I appreciate that you mentioned the action piece as well, because, you know, this happens in all of our lives. It happens in my life as well. But I see this, you know, more times than not, what stops people from wherever they want to go is just doing it. I mean, obviously the best slogan ever made, just do it, because sometimes you just need to do it. Like sometimes you already have all the information. And I know for myself and a lot of people I've talked to, like we can get so stuck in like the knowledge gathering, the information gathering, well, maybe if I just get one more coach, maybe if I just listen to one more podcast, maybe if I just read one more book, maybe if I just watch, like, okay, there's a point, like that's all great. I do a lot of that as well, but there's a point where you can just do that as an excuse not to act, not to actually do anything.
I was actually speaking to one of our JBD clients who's been with us for a while. And as we were talking, there were a number of tendencies. And this is an individual who, you know, eats self-help books, listens to podcasts. And I said, you've been at this for 3 years. I'm not seeing the footwork. And I'm a New York direct shooter. I'm not for everybody. I don't mince my words. And she was able to go, wow, you're right. And, you know, the encouragement was, you've got everything you need. Now you really just have to step over that threshold. And it's scary and it's uncomfortable. And every time you do that thing that you're afraid to do because the sky's going to fall and the earth is going to eat you up, guess what? You wake up the next day, the sky's still blue and it's up there and the earth didn't eat you up, and you're one step closer to the best version of yourself.
I'm all about morning rituals, but sometimes you need to cut down your morning rituals and just go do something, as an example.
I have a business mentor who says, listening to your thoughts. So for me, working out in the morning, there are mornings I wake up and it's like, you know, your hip is hurting. You did it yesterday. And I've gotten 2025 was my year to just do it. And so I've just done it on a whole bunch of fronts, which has been like just brilliant. And so it's like, while I'm arguing with the voice that I shouldn't be listening to, I'm rolling out my yoga mat, I'm pulling out my computer. And it's like, I'm still talking myself out of it, but I'm setting myself to do it. And so just keep doing the footwork, whatever that means for you.
Well, and you mentioned really, really good things. I heard, I think this was in, Atomic Habits, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, but there was this example that he gave, and maybe I'm misquoting, but there's this example he gave of, look, if you want to go run a marathon, the only thing you need to think about, the only thing you need to worry about is putting on your running shoes. Because the moment you put on your running shoes, you walk outside. Yeah. Now, maybe you start walking, maybe you start jogging, maybe you start whatever. The point is, you need to get outside. You need to get on your shoes and get outside. That's it. Don't worry about the 26.2 miles. Just worry about putting on your shoes and walking outside. So I love that you were saying that, because even as you're having these thoughts of like, no, you shouldn't be doing this, you're walking, you're laying out your yoga mat, you're doing the things, right? You're doing
like, okay, all right, fine. And it's so funny. It's absolutely hysterical that we've got this ego who's like, no, you don't have to do it. And too often we listen to the voice in our head and it's like, it's wrong. It's a liar. Stop listening.
Years ago, I had specifically a business coach that was phenomenal. And I remember having a phone call with him one day and I was saying, I'm just not feeling it. I don't like my work right now. I hate everything that's going on. I dislike all my clients. I don't like what I'm doing. I've been doing this too long. I'm bitter about, like, just a bunch of negativity coming out of my mouth. And I said, I just don't know what to do. And the only thing he said to me was chop wood, carry water.
I've heard that.
And that is, I think it's a Buddhist phrase, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And the point of the phrase is just do it. Like, you already know. Here's the thing. Sometimes I think we don't give ourselves enough credit. We already know what to do. We have very strong intuitions and guts and everything else. We already know what to do, but there's all the shit that gets in the way of actually doing it. And sometimes we just need to chop wood and carry water. And I remember I touched base with him a couple months after that. And I was like, man, I don't know. It's just not getting better. He said the exact same thing. And after he said that a few times and I listened and I started doing it, guess what happened?
It all worked out.
It all worked out. I started having a more positive mindset about what I was doing. I was like, whoa, wow, I'm actually accomplishing things. But it's only because I just did it. I didn't want to do it. I just did it.
And just to put a bow on the entire conversation, going through divorce is no time to go it alone. There's too many complexities. There's too many emotions. There's too many unknowns. There's too many decisions to make. There's too many wounds. There's too many uncertainties. You want to have someone in your corner who is a good sounding board, who's skilled, who understands the divorce arena, who will hold space for you at your pace in your time to figure it out, and then you will just chop wood and carry water.
And to your point too, this is not because you're not able to do it. We're all able to do it. But when you're going through divorce, you don't have capacity. There's just too many, like you can't have capacity for all the elements. You can't have the capacity for your full emotional bucket, your full spiritual bucket, your full physical bucket, your full financial bucket, because one of them is overflowing right now and I can't even pay attention to the other ones.
And I think the other thing, especially for men who are high achieving or they're running their own businesses or they're C-suite executives, it is impossible to be on your A game while going through a high conflict divorce. A divorce, it's hard. A high conflict divorce, it's impossible. And so if that's you, and on top of everything else, you're beating yourself up because I didn't remember that appointment and I didn't speak well at that meeting and I can't believe, if you don't find some grace for yourself now, that's part of this journey for you, is to find patience, to find grace, to find vulnerability. These are all parts of what you're being invited into through the difficulty so that you can emerge the best version of yourself.
Beautiful. I think that's a great ending to the podcast right now. I could talk to you for hours more, but we will on your podcast and it'll be fun. So Karen, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your knowledge and wisdom. And this was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I know a lot of people are going to get out of it. And, for anyone listening, watching, what I'd encourage you to do, which I encourage you to do just about every episode, is if there was elements of this episode that you heard that you're like, yeah, that really relates, or I really relate that to somebody else. Couple things. Reach out to somebody, reach out to Karen, reach out to me. I would encourage you that if this episode or parts of this episode reminded you of somebody or somebody that's going through it, just send it to them and just say, hey, listen to this. I really thought about you, or clip it. Be like, hey, minute 35 to 45, I think is amazing. You should go listen to that.
Beautiful.
Encourage them in that. And as always too, if you liked it, please head over to YouTube, even if you're not watching this on YouTube, and give us a like and subscribe. It helps us continue to put out these episodes for free. So Karen, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you. I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation on your podcast soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for what you do in the world.
Absolutely. All right, derelicts. Until next time, we'll see you.